Hello, everyone. I'm going to talk about the Aurora Borealis and how to view that in the lower 48. But this information is good for kind of anywhere, really. I get a lot of questions, and I see a lot of questions about how to view the auroras. People download Aurora apps. They don't know what they're reading. They want to know, what the KP means or the BZ, or they want to know what the BT means or solar wind speeds. And, they get confused. What can be predicted? What can't be predicted? Oh, will they be able to see it, or is it just for photography? So I made some notes, and that's what I kind of wanted to talk about with everyone today. What all this means to you, whether you're trying to photograph it or to view it with your eyes, and to how that relates to viewing the aurora borealis. This can be, you can use this information whether you're in, Iceland or Norway or Sweden or even the lower 48. It just kind of changes when you can view it. So the first thing I want to talk about is the KP level. We've all heard of the KP level, most likely. If not, it's basically the strength of the aurora. If you're like high up Fairbanks, Alaska, Lapland, Sweden, Iceland, a KP2, KP3, you're going to see the auroras dancing most likely. You start getting out to like Vancouver, Canada, you need something like a KP4, Seattle KP5, Portland, Oregon a KP6. Portland is about the 45th parallel. So depending on where you're at, the level you need changes. There's other components to it, but that's the first thing to pay attention to. A high KP level does not necessarily mean you're going to get good auroras. We'll get to that in a minute. A geomagnetic storm means you're far more likely to see in a place at the lower 48. KP5 is a G class 1 storm. KP6 is a G class 2. KP3 is G class 7. Or KP7 is G class 3, excuse me. KP6 is G class 2. KP5 is G class 1. So you want to pay attention to the KP and when it can spike. You'll have a lot of apps that allow you to ping at a long-term forecast. Those are worthless. You can't predict the KP level any more than about 3 days out accurately. So you really want to pay attention to the forecast about 3 days in advance. A division of the NOAA also does a forecast on the online, which you can view, which is pretty good as well if you don't like the apps. Basically, pay attention to about 3 days on that, and that's the one you can predict. Everything else is really spur of the moment, and that's why chasing auroras gets the name chasing auroras, kind of like chasing storms. The second thing you're going to see if you log into an app and you try to read the app on what you're seeing, you're going to see the BZ level. The BZ level is the interplanetary magnetic field's direction. There's actually 3 axes to it. The only one you need to care about is the BZ. The BZ is the north and south axis. And if it's north, it's a positive number, and that's no good. That's not what you want. If it's south, it's a negative number. That's what you want if you want to see auroras. The more negative, the more south, the better your chances are going to be. You do not want a positive BZ or a BZ right around 0. The BT is one I get asked a lot of questions about. That's the IMF strength, the interplanetary magnetic field strength. Basically, the stronger it is, the brighter it'll be. So, 10 NTs, it's measured in NTs, is considered strong. 20 is considered, or 10 is considered moderately strong. 20 is considered strong. 30 is exceedingly strong. So if the other conditions line up right and the NTs are higher, the BT is a better number, you're going to see a brighter aurora. The last one you're going to see, the fourth component of that you're going to see when you're looking at apps or the websites reading it, giving you a prediction info, is the solar wind speed. Simply put, the stronger it is, the faster the solar winds are, the stronger they are, the stronger the aurora. About the only time you will ever see an aurora down here in the lower 48 with a positive BZ is if the solar wind speeds are really strong. If they're really strong, if they're moving really fast, you can see the auroras down here. But in general, you really need a negative BZ. The solar wind speeds you can kind of pay attention to. The 2 things I'd pay attention to are the KP and the BZ. The BZ is really important. Unfortunately, you can't really predict it. The best prediction you can get for a BZ is about 15 to 60 minutes out. So the best thing to do is to kind of look at the KP levels, see where the KP is going to be. Being here in Portland, Oregon, I pay attention to I pay attention to anything that's KP4 or higher. And the reason is if the BZ drops really negative, I have seen an aurora show up to various strengths at KP4. I was at Mount Hood several years ago trying to get something, and it was only supposed to be KP4, so you shouldn't even see anything past Vancouver, Canada. BZ dropped really negative, and we got some nice pink glowing of the aurora on the horizon to the north and northeast. You didn't see the dancing at that level. You didn't see pillars, but if you're photographing it, there was a noticeable pink glow. Um, on October 11th, I was up again out in the mountains, and the first two storms had ended, and nothing else was expected. It was KP4, and the BZ dropped to -9, heading to -10, and the skies just lit up, dancing pillars. It was great. So pay attention to the BZ. If that flips, you're gonna get a show. If the KP level is within a click or two of where you need it to be. So it doesn't necessarily need to be where it's at. Like right now in the Northwest, you need it KP6 for Portland, KP5 for Seattle, but even a KP5 or 4 would show something if the BZ flipped. And that's the one to pay attention to. That's your wild card. Like I said, the other two components to kind of pay attention to a lesser extent are going to be your BZ, which again is the BZ is the one you want to pay attention to. The BT, which is your strength, and the solar wind speed, which is faster. Higher strength, faster wind speed, brighter auroras, more likely to see them. But the BZ, the solar, is is that component that if it drops negative, you'll get a show. If everything else is consistent and the KP level is close enough. Like when the current storm, if that rolls in and we're at a KP4 or KP5 and the BZ drops negative, it'll show. I don't have to be a KP7. Sometimes you're better off with a KP5 and a really negative BZ than a positive BZ at KP7. So it's it is one of those things where you can't really read the BZ, but you have to be aware of those apps, and you kind of want to be at a place where you're maybe within, I'm going to say at most 60 minutes of a spot to view it, because you can only predict it about 60 minutes out for the BZ. The KP can be predicted about 30 minutes or about 3 days out further. 30 minutes, you're pretty darn accurate. I've usually almost always at a KP level on a 30-minute prediction be accurate. So I pay attention at the 3-day point, the 2-day point, and when it looks like this is where it's going to be, that's when I'll head out, and then I'll continue paying attention to the KP and the BZ level. And when that BZ flips, that's when it shows up. Another thing is, we can photograph the auroras before you can see them with your eyes. So you have to realize, are you trying to photograph it or see it with your eyes? If you want to see it with your eyes, you need a stronger KP and a higher BZ. It's just that simple. But if you're trying to photograph it, you can photograph stuff that you can't quite see yet. If you can see it out in the lower 48, it will typically start as not the pictures you see where it's grandiose color, although you can get some nice color if it's strong enough. But you'll see a glow on the horizon, like a faint glow. It maybe moves a little bit like this. Looks different. That's your auroras. And if you've been there before it started and you see it when it started, you'll notice it, and you'll notice that coming up. You can see the auroras on rare occasions, even further south than, let's say, the 45th parallel, Portland, Oregon. If it's a KP8, which is a G4 class storm, those are really rare, only about 100 times per geomagnetic cycle, or solar cycle, which is about every 11 years. And if it happens during the daytime, forget it. You're not going to see anything. But if you see those, you can see as far south as Alabama, North Carolina, a KP9. Storm is level is a really strong storm. Those are like 4 times every 11 years. Those will see it in Texas or Florida. But if you're in a split base like any of those, and you hear of like a G4 or G5 storm, which is a KP8 or KP9, pay attention, because it's gonna you have a chance to see something. The stronger they are, the more it disrupts electromagnetic stuff and electrical stuff. So power grids and, wireless stuff and everything else. So if you're out and your stuff starts going wonky, you're in a high geomagnetic storm, that's why. Unfortunately, like I said, you cannot accurately predict the BZ. And that's due to the fact that the BZ is read from a satellite I wrote the note here, so let me bear with me as I look. The Sun-Earth Lagrange point 1, which is a point between the Earth and the Sun where the gravity of the Sun and the pull of the Earth is equal. So that's the spot they read the solar wind speeds and the BZ from, and that's where they can see what the BZ is doing. And when it hits that point, we know it's headed to Earth. and we know if it's going to trend positive or negative, and that's why we only have 15 minutes to 60 minutes, because that's where we read it. Hopefully, 5, 10 years down the line, we'll be able to accurately predict the BZ better, because that's really your X factor. The KP level is important, but you need the BZ to be negative. The more negative, the better. And again, if those are all equal, the BZ is negative, the KP is nice and high, let's say G6, G7, and you're somewhere in the lower 48, the upper half, northern lower 48, and the BT, which is the strength, is real strong. Then you're going to get a brighter show, and if the solar wind speeds go real fast, you're going to get a brighter show. Solar wind speeds go fast, you're going to be more likely to see it, even with a less negative BZ. But the BZ is really that wild card. That's what you want to pay attention to. So anytime you want to read the auroras, you want to look at an app, you want to make sure it gives you KP level, and you want to make sure it gives you um, the BZ, and you want to try to the BZ is going to be within 60 minutes, so you just really need a live reading on that. The KP level, like I said, don't pay attention to anything outside of 3 days. I mean, you go back to the 27-day cycle they give you, for aurora predicting. They're supposed to be nothing, but 3 days from the 17th of October, a couple days from tomorrow, so a couple days, yesterday, all of a sudden the KP level is supposed to spike, and that's because you can't predict that anything more than 3 days out. So chasing auroras is very much a last minute thing. If you want to see them, you want to look for places that have you want to find a place with a dark sky. So very similar to photographing the Milky Way. Um, Go to if you have an app like a Planet Pro Photography or Photo Pills, you want to go to the dark sky map and look for a place that's a class 3 or darker. That's a blue color, or the gray or no color, which would be class 2 or class 1. Anything brighter than that, you're going to have really hard time seeing it with your naked eye, even if the camera can capture it. So you want to look for a nice dark sky spot away from light pollution. You're going to want to look north or northeast. So you want to make sure that there's no cities in front of you. Going north of being north of south of Seattle, looking north is no good, because the lights of Seattle are going to wash it out. But if you go east of Seattle, let's say into the mountains on Highway 2, the Mountain Loop Highway, now there's nothing north of you for hundreds of miles. Now you got a nice dark sky, nice clean horizon. Now if the KP level spikes up, the BZ level drops negative. Now you have a good chance to, at bare minimum, photograph it. And if anything shows up, you will be able to photograph it with a decent setup. And if it spikes high enough, you'll be able to see it with your eyes. Like I said, sometimes you can actually see it pretty well. I remember in 2014-15, we had some really high class firms. You could actually see it really nice, pretty decently. The one on October 11th was more faint, but you could kind of see the faint colors going, which was still kind of cool, but really bright to the camera. So, you can also type in light pollution map on your computer and just look for places, again, that are blue or black or gray. And, stay away from the colored areas, because those are the areas that have higher light pollution. Um, and if you're trying to photograph it, that's kind of the same thing you want to. You want to go to a place with dark skies facing north to northwest. And, so that's all very similar. And if you're trying to photograph it, there are different ways you can go about it. You go back about 6, 7 years ago. For me, I didn't go more for the dancing and the pillars. I went more for the sheer glow, which it's a different type of photography for your settings than if you're trying to capture some pillars or dancing. A good middle of the road would be like 3200 ISO down here in the lower 48, at least 3200 ISO, 20 seconds up 2.8. You start going up into Canada and Finland and Norway, Sweden, Iceland, where it's much more vivid. You're much more north. You shorten that exposure time because it gets brighter at a lower KP level, lower wind speed, etc. But here in the lower 48, nor southern Canada, that's a pretty solid thing. That'll give you a decent glow. If the pillars are there, you'll see the pillars. So 3200 ISO, 2.8, 20 seconds. If you have a camera that's, I'm going to get a little bit technical here, but ISO invariant, which basically means it has really good dynamic range. You could go down to like 1600 ISO or even less, and then pull it up in post-processing. If you're with your cell phone, you're going to want to basically put your ISO up high, and then try to lengthen your exposure 30 seconds. Hold it still, so get a little cell phone tripod and use that. You can capture the aurora with your cell phone with a strong enough storm, as long as you have manual mode. Apple users, you can't do manual, so there is a way to go about that with night mode. I don't have an Apple, but I know people that have been able to. But like I said, if you're trying to take you with a camera, you're going to be able to get something before you're going to be able to see it decently with your eyes. So just keep that in mind. And very important with auroras is head out on hope, expect the worst. I know that sounds bad, but it's so dependent on the BZ level dropping negative, dropping to the going south. If you have a good KP storm, a KP6, and the BZ's positive, you're not going to see much other than glow. Like I said, I've seen a KP4 drop, negative 15 on the BZ, and suddenly the sky comes to life, and I'm at a KP6. So, you know, you don't have to have a KP6 to head out. I'll head out even at a KP4 and just pray the BZ goes negative. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, and I come away with nothing. Likewise, I've gone out at a KP6 and come out with nothing because the BZ never dropped. So you read the KP level, and when it looks like it might be enough that stuff can work out, you head out and you keep looking at your apps, pay attention to the BZ level, and you kind of pray and hope that it drops. And if it drops and it flips negative, to the south, then you got a real good chance at some nice skies for photography, possibly some good viewing with your eyes and all that some stuff. So it's the auroras are very much different than the Milky Way, where clear sky, certain time, you know what you're gonna get. It's very much like storm chasing with tornadoes. Where the clouds and everything's lining up, and you go and you hope that it turns out. Same thing with auroras, and you got to read everything like that and be willing to head out at a moment's notice. Now, unfortunately, if you're closer to the equator, stuff like that, you're really not going to see it. But you can use this information to kind of plan. And in that case, if you want to see the auroras, you're going to want to plan not for a place like the northern parts of, North America. You're going to want to plan for the typical viewing places like, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, Finland, northern Canada, Alaska, because those are the places where you get a KP2 or KP3, which is quite common. You're going to see something. You go to a place like that, you get clear skies, you're going to see it at least once or twice if you're there for a week, because, you know, it's dark most of the daytime, most of the day during the winter. And, it doesn't take a very high KP level to spike auroras with your eyes and for photography. But if you're in the northern, if you live in the northern, part of the U.S. or southern Canada, where you can get there quickly, you can pay attention to those things I talked about, and you can you get a good gauge on when you might be able to see it. It's been a pretty quiet several years for Aurora, to be honest. The solar cycle went quiet, I don't know, 5 years ago or more. It went quiet, and the new 11-year cycle is starting right up, and we're getting into the active part of it again, which is why we had a spike this summer. We had some viewing on the 11th, and we have some possible viewing tomorrow. It's supposed to arrive Pacific Standard Time around 2 to 5 p.m. tomorrow. So, you can translate that to wherever you are in the world. Um, if you're in a place where it's dark, then that's going to be your best viewing. Assuming, again, solar wind speeds kick up, it's going to arrive earlier. BZ drops, it's going to show up earlier. But all things staying equal, 2 to 5 p.m. Pacific time is when they expect it to hit KP7 levels. So if you're on the, East Coast, you're going to be dark by then. So if you're on the East Coast, Eastern Standard Time, or Europe, you're going to be in the middle of the night by then. You're going to get great viewing. If you're on the West Coast like I am, you're going to miss the peak unless the solar wind speeds kick up and kick it here earlier, or kick it here later, or the BZ flips. But again, it can happen. So if you're on the West Coast, don't be discouraged. I'd head out anyway. I would just make sure you're somewhere at sunset, because as soon as it's dark, look north, you might see it. Further east you go, the more likely it's going to be dark when it does arrive. As of yesterday night, I went to bed. It was supposed to arrive today about 3 a.m., 2 a.m., or not today, but Saturday morning at that time, I should say. And now they're pushing it back to KP5 levels, arriving at 5 in the morning. And, then the KP7 max at about 2 to 5 p.m. Still be KP6, though, when it gets dark, and it'll last at KP5 until after midnight Pacific Standard Time. So, again, pay attention to that BZ level, because, let's say 11 p.m. is KP5 and the BZ flips to a negative 10. Even down in, like, the Cascades of Oregon, like Mount Hood, that area, Sparks, you might see some color. You might get some dancing or pillars. I've seen it in those areas with a KP5 flipping on a negative BZ, and suddenly the color, the aurora show up and come to life. So just pay attention to all that, and just kind of know when to go out, I would plan to be wherever you are. I'd plan to be, if you want to view it, I would plan to be in a nice dark sky spot at sunset. You're going to start getting civil twilight, dusk ends, and dusk happens at about a half hour after sunset, wherever you are. And that's the point when you can no longer conduct activities without artificial light. Nautical twilight, nautical dusk happens at the point where nautical twilight ends and astronomical twilight begins. That's the spot where you begin to photograph the Milky Way. So it's going to be after nautical dusk that you're going to be able to see the auroras begin to creep out, which is going to be the nautical dusk is about an hour after sunset. About an hour and a half is when you get astronomical dusk and true light. So about an hour to hour and a half after sunset's that window when you're going to be able to start seeing the auroras if the KP level's right, if it's really KP 5 or 6, and if the BZ flips negative. So again, in a short recap, if you want to try to see them tomorrow and you're in the northern half of the U.S. or further north or the equivalent parallel, which Portland, Oregon is at the 45th parallel. So if you're in Europe or someplace like that, look up where you are, kind of in your latitude, longitude. Further north of 45 you are, the better your chances of seeing it are. And, you know, just plan to be somewhere at night. So about an hour and a half after sunset. I'd maybe get there early so you can kind of set up, know where you're doing, know where you're going. And then you're going to want to look for the KP level. The higher the KP level, the more likely you're going to see it. So again, if it's a KP7, you're golden. Probably, but again, it does depend on that BZ. If it's KP6, you still have a really good shot. KP5, even a place like Portland around the 45th and a half parallel. You know, I get outside the city to the east or west in the dark sky areas. I can still see it if that BZ flips negative, which is that second component to pay attention to, that BZ. It's basically your solar wind direction. And like I said, if it's northward, if it's a positive number, that's not good. If it's positive, you're going to need a really fast solar wind speed and a really high KP level to see it. If it's zero, same. You know, really fast solar wind speed, really high KP level. If it starts going negative, let's say -8, -10, you're gonna have a really it's gonna kick that KP level up, and you're gonna have a really good chance of seeing the aurora. If it goes -15, you're golden. It'll kick into KP4 up to like seeing it. So those are the two things to pay attention to. Pay lesser extent attention to the solar wind speed. Again, if that starts going higher, you don't need quite as negative a BZ. And when you look at your BZ and your KP numbers, if that BT level is a higher number, you're going to get a stronger color, a stronger show. So a 20 or a 30 or a 10 is going to be a lot brighter than like a 2, you know, for the BT. So and that's going to translate into more with your eyes. The higher that level, the brighter, the more likely you are to see it. So if the KP level's high and the BZ is a negative, and the BT is low, it's going to be a lot more faint. You're going to kind of, like I said, you're going to want to look out for you're going to look for the faint color changes. So if you get there and notice kind of what looks like maybe a green glow on the horizon, that's what you're looking for, or like just a slight color shift change. You let your eyes adjust for 20-30 minutes. Do not turn on a light. Don't turn on your flashlight. Don't look at your phone. Once your eyes are nice and dark, a half hour after you've been out there in the dark, you will notice when you're looking north or northeast, you'll notice those color shifts. And that's the auroras. When you see that, that's where they are. And like I said, if you're lucky and the BT is high, the BZ is negative, the KP is high, then even in the lower 40, you can actually see some stuff like you see in Iceland. But even if that doesn't show up, you can still photograph it. And like I said, so if you have a little cell phone tripod, keep it still. Highest ISO you can go, longest shutter speed. Your aperture is fixed. If you have a camera that's like a DSLR or mirrorless, good place to start in the lower 48 is 3200 ISO, f2.8, 20 seconds. If you have a faster lens, you can cut that exposure time down. If you have a camera that has better dynamic range, so ISO invariant at night, you can lower the ISO. If it's brighter, you can lower all of that. But that's a really good starting point. And again, what do you want to go for is the last thing. Like I said, 6-8 years ago, I went for a lot of color glow. You look at my photos from Crater Lake, Sparks Lake. You get a little bit of dancing, but it's mostly washed out because I went for sheer color glow. Just I wanted the color ripped across the sky. Last couple years I've been photographing it more for color, but also dancing or pillars. So I've changed my exposure settings to what I just said. But if you want to go just straight color glow, you just want a ripped sky, 6400 ISO, f2.8, 25 seconds is a good starting point. But like on October 11th, that really washed out that would have washed out the dancing, the pillars. but that would have given you color glow extending really high into the sky. 3200 ISO, 20 seconds, f2.8 gave you a good mix of color glow above the horizon with some dancing and some pillars. So I really hope this information is helpful. I really hope it's helped people, and they can kind of use that information to kind of plan Aurora trips. Like I said, if you're not in a place, it's like where you can view things when they get to a KP6 or 7, which is about the 45th parallel. You can still use this information to plan a trip to a place like Norway or Alaska or northern Canada, like Churchill. Um, you know, the Scandinavian countries, Finland, Norway, Sweden, up north, and you can, and plan it then. And when you're up that high, you don't need a KP6 or 7. KP2 or 3 will suffice with a moderately negative BZ. So I'm planning to do a ebook. I'm going to offer my website as a free download. I'm not done with it yet, but I will post a link on my Instagram, and it will be in the links section of my website you can get to from my Instagram. Or if you don't have my Instagram, if you're on Facebook, it's jamesmeadphotography.com/links with a capital L. And it'll be posted there. It'll also be you see a drop down tab on my website. And when it's there, you can download it, and we'll talk about all of this with a little more detail, pictures, things like that to help you understand it. So I want to thank you all. And anyways, everyone that supported me after I had my heart attack, I want to thank you. It's been a rough recovery, but my last cardiac rehab was on Monday, and I'm getting back out there and doing what I need to do again. And I'm so grateful for everyone and their support and their well wishes. And I hope anyone that goes and tries to see it gets some good auroras, viewing or whatever in the next day or two. Take care and thank you.